Live show from Billiards Digest in the house. What's up, fellas?
Not too much. No lead-in music.
Do you still know
No.
how to run the show? It's been quite a while already.
I know. I feel like I haven't seen you guys.
Yeah.
Since before Joey had the beard going.
Oh, yeah. So I don't know. I've been busy over here. I had a wife and kid in Spain playing soccer, and so just trying to keep up with the little ones around here has been kind of tough.
Yeah,
It's
So-
rough having two 10-year-olds there, and then meanwhile I got a house full of girls like 6 and under, and one of them being 3 and wants to tear up the whole house, and Joey's like, "I'm dying over here, Mike," and I'm like,
Yeah, meanwhile, I've got nothing, and
Mike's
complaints.
drinking martinis, living his best life.
Yeah, no complaints, guys.
In Wisconsin. Yeah.
Got
Well, hey,
lots
there's been a lot of
snowballs.
stuff going on, man. I wanted to get back together and talk with you guys and, start talking about some of it because, when you think Matchroom, you think boxing, right? At least the first thing you think. And there's been some, what appears to be punching and counterpunching that I've seen. So the first thing I saw, I actually follow Billiards Digest on Facebook, and
Beautiful.
Penozo, you did a great job of writing up kind of the decision that I believe after the Chinese 8-ball, the WPA got together, had like a meeting of the bigwigs and made a decision to kind of hitch their wagon to 10-ball, which
Right.
we know how Matchrooms hitched their wagon to 9-ball, and Predator and CSI and now WPA are, linked up with 10-ball. And it just seemed to be an interesting decision. And so I wanted to kind of get you guys together, talk about that a little bit, and then we'll talk about Matchroom's counterpunch on that.
Yeah, it's kind of Cold War kind of stuff. I mean, there wasn't any action going on, but it was all kind of like behind the scenes. But yeah, it was just a letter that the WPA General Secretary sent to WPA members, and it went into talked about how the board met in China during this Hayball Grandmasters Championship.
How did you get this letter? That's number one.
Yeah.
Because
Did Woodward or Bernstein ever tell you who Deep Throat was?
no. I'm just saying. Listen,
No,
I just
they don't.
yeah. There you go, my man.
Can't reveal his sources.
That's why Mike's the legend. That's why we bring him on.
So basically, what they talked about other things, and they almost kind of kissed off as an aside that another issue that they discussed was 3 major events: the 2025 World Games, the 2023 WCBS Championship, and the 2023 World Youth Championship. And they just went on to say all 3 of these events are now going to be 10-ball. So, I spoke to a couple people concerned with the WPA, a couple people in the WPA, and, the kind of party line is that the party line is that 10-ball, it's more competitive. It's more, it's a better playing field for the guys to play in. It's just, it's just smoke and mirrors. I mean, what they did was definitely a response to Matchroom not having sanctioned events with WPA other than the World Championship. And it kind of makes sense to a certain extent that, listen, if they're not going to sanction any of their events with us, why, what are we supposed to go chase major 9-ball tournaments? Matchroom will step on anybody who tries to run a major 9-ball tournament, without their, stamp of approval on it. So why would we even bother getting involved in it, right? So they're going to go ahead with 10-ball. 10-ball at the World Games is an interesting subject because a lot of players who get sent by their national federations who qualify for this, do so through major 9-ball tournaments, World Championship, things like that. So what we don't know going forward 100% is that going to change? Is if Josh Filler wins the World 9-ball event and another Moritz Neuhausen wins the World 10-ball event, which one's going to the next World Game? I can be pretty well sure it would be Moritz, right? So, but they're just making a couple of strategic moves that way. I thought it was interesting that they included the youth championships, the junior world championships, because that's a Predator event, and they didn't really mention Predator, or you kind of have to assume that this was discussed with them before they went and made the wholesale change. This is now going to be 10 ball. As for the WCBS championship, that's an event that I don't even think that they've even formally announced yet. This is something that's going to be a team, from what I know, is going to be a team event that includes pool, carom, billiards, snooker, and hayball. So each team from each country will have a snooker player, a carom player, a pool, and probably two pool players. A pool player and a Chinese.
I'll take China.
Yeah, I'll take China.
I'll take China right now. I'll take China. Blind. I don't care who the team is. I'll gladly take China, boys. Just my arms. I'll give you the field, matter of fact.
So, in this whole, and then it brings into a whole other discussion of hayball, which is just a weird name anyways, right? So I asked someone, what the hell does hayball mean? And they told me that it was the Mandarin equivalent of black ball, which would make sense because it's 8 ball. But how can hayball be the Mandarin equivalent of black ball? I mean, they're both English translations, right? So I'm missing something in the translation there. But anyways, so hayball, as we all know, just by the last tournament with a $700,000+ first prize, is throwing a lot of money at Q Sports right now, and the WPA doesn't want to miss its opportunity, so they're finding ways
Shocking.
to include.
I can't believe it.
Yeah. So here we go. Hay, the word hay is black in Mandarin. So hence hayball. So there you go. We learn something new every time we come on this show, Joey. We learn something new.
I think Molina's got a lot to say about this because he's so angry that his camera's flickering. So, Molina, what's going on there? You got a lot of kinetic energy over there. You want to say something about this?
I think the WPA got into my wire back here between my computer and my camera because they know I'm about to go off about how spineless they come out looking on this. No, it's I don't want to say it's shocking, but it seems like they've completely adjusted what would be their foundation for the sake of another money grab, right? Because once Matchroom and 9 Ball said, hey, we're no longer interested, they're tying their wagon to 10 Ball, with the exception of, oh, by the way, we're going to also include the biggest prize fund sport in all of Q Sports, which is the hayball. So they look real like they'll do whatever they can, and it comes across a little desperate for my money. Just reading that announcement, to be honest.
Look, I've said it before. I'll say it again. You have 9 Ball and you have 10 Ball, and you have Matchroom and you have Predator CSI. And, I just think that having this argument about the games, there's endearing qualities to both games. And the fact that one almost won't recognize the other game and vice versa, to me, it really does a disservice to the industry, right? Wouldn't it be great if there was a series of events through Predator or a series of events through Matchroom that incorporated multiple games, different games? We know that, you take a player like Albin in 9 Ball, he's subject to be the best player in the world at any given day. 10 Ball, little different story. So wouldn't it be intriguing if you had, some events where maybe a guy like Albin Ocean's a favorite, and other events where it would be a little bit of a long shot for him to win the event over some more accomplished 10 Ball players and 10 Ball breakers. So I just don't like how the two games are being pitted against each other. Nothing against the two entities involved. I think they're both doing great things for the sport. But 2 or 3. But I just don't like it. I don't like how the games are being pitted against each other.
They're just soft. That's all.
Well, they are being pitted against each other to the extent that at some point players are going to kind of have to make a decision. And it's really, to me, it's really kind of interesting because you've got WPA, which is starting to shift some things to 10 Ball, which I would, won't be for this year, but I would expect next year, the Euro Tour, will be predominantly 10 Ball, I would guess. because
Well, part of the reason
European-
why that Matchroom cut the ties with the European the EPBF is because they wanted to align themselves with the WPA. Am I wrong there, Mike?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean that's part of it. I mean, there were a few things involved with with Matchroom and the EPBF, and the Euro Tour kind of, not being on the same page. I've heard some rumblings that the Euro Tour, didn't like the idea that Matchroom was going to control everything, and which I found really ironic for the Euro Tour, which has done nothing but control players in Europe for 20 years. Talk about having a gun to your head. So, but it's, there's those arguments. One of the things I think is really interesting about it is that you've got this move to 10 ball by WPA. You've got Predator running 10 ball events around the globe. And you have Matchroom running 9 ball events. And it's interesting to me because, the player's going to go where the money is, right? And the prevailing money is with Matchroom and 9 ball.
Neither of them then, right?
Well, but here's the thing.
Hey,
Matchroom has,
Chinese A-ball, here we come, boys.
Matchroom has thrown all their eggs in the 9 ball basket, right?
Yes.
But we all know that if you took all the top pro players and said you had to play one game
10 ball.
who the best pros are, and you're going to have a tour, what would it be? It would be 10 ball. 100%.
It would be 80% of them would say 10 ball.
Yeah, at least. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of interesting to me that, that now that, all the players saying, well, the 9 ball is the future and all that stuff. Well, it's been for the last 40 years, but whatever. So, they're aligning with.
Well, that's the genius of Matchroom marketing. Like if you look at it in your post from 7 hours ago on Billiards Digest, there's talking about Matchroom's kind of, World 9 ball tour. When you look at it, Francisco Sanchez Ruiz has a quote in there talking about how great 9 ball is. It's the future, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he's a Predator sponsored player, and so at what point does he start getting pressure from both sides on this?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And, I don't think that when you see all this stuff that comes out about 9 ball this, 9 ball that, Jason Shaw having 9 ball, a sticker on his arm, while he's shooting, I don't really think that they truly believe that 9 ball is the best game. But I do think they truly believe that Matchroom may be the best, option for them going forward in terms of making money and prominence and Mosconi Cup and things for their future. So I get it. But at the same time, I don't know. I'm kind of torn.
Shocking, Joey. You're in the middle of the game.
He's on the fence.
Yeah.
I shot on the fence a little,
Yeah. I don't know where I stand on this one. I don't know. Both entities are great, by the way, as Joey Ryan would say. I think. Go ahead, Joey.
I was just going to say, Penoza, why don't you take us through the Matchroom response?
Well, I'd like to hear what Mike thinks about the whole 9 ball versus 10 ball argument and how this is playing out. As someone mentioned in here, one of the things that's interesting, I'm going to jump ahead with, is someone mentioned European players are already divided. Many will not attend next UK Open. And we know that there are some players who are going to play in it and skip because it runs at the same time as the European Championships.
Yeah.
And the European Championships, if you're a European player, especially if you're not one of the top 2 players in your federation, that becomes a big tool for you to get into international events, to get funding, to get travel stipends, to get the okay to play in other events. So you see in instances like David and Francisco are definitely playing in the UK Open, right?
100%.
But you see Jonas and Delgado are playing the European Championship.
Yeah.
Right. Niels Fan, who gets funding from Holland based on whether he medals in certain events, used to rely heavily on the European Championships. Well, earlier this year, he happened to finish in the quarterfinals of the World Championship, and that jumped him into that funding status for Holland. So he doesn't have to go to the European Championship. So he's going to play in the UK Open. So people are already starting to have to play a little bit, try to figure out where they're going to go. It doesn't look like the EPBF is coming down too hard on players just yet.
That's the operative word, Mike. Yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
So they will adjust their policies going forward, guaranteed, with where players can play and can they skip a Euro Tour event to play in a Matchroom 9-ball event, things like that, and what's the repercussion if they don't. I think
That's
if
their
you
only
look at
leverage, though, Mike, ain't it? That's their only.
it, pretty much is, but that's big leverage with some of these countries that put some pretty good funding into the sport and into some of the players. So
That's where it becomes difficult when you have so many events, and really, I mean, you can fluff up all these numbers, but the fact of the matter is, the majority of the players are lucky if they break even
yeah,
traveling from one event to the other.
right.
So getting that funding is vital to them being able to pursue their dreams for right now.
I agree. I agree.
But I feel like the most interesting part to all this is how it's going to affect the World Nine Ball, because you mentioned federations, and a lot of the ways that you get into the World Nine Ball Championships is by getting X amount of points based off the WPA. But now that they're not aligning themselves with Nine Ball, I would highly, highly doubt that Emily would allow any 10-ball rankings to play a role into whether or not said player can get into the World Nine Ball, if that's their alignment. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, sure. And Matchroom won't even touch it. Matchroom will have their own worldwide rankings based on their 9-ball tour.
Right,
And
but before it was like
you'll get an
X
invitation.
Federation got so
Yeah,
many
well,
allocated
they're
spots.
not going to talk to the federations, but the federations may still have control over whether they're going to allow player number 79 who got an invite to the World Championship to play in the World Championship without repercussions, right? So that's where the leverage may switch a little bit, and you'll have players having to make a decision, and then the decision becomes tough for some of these players, because if you're not one of the top players and you want to chase the Matchroom 9-ball ranking tour, 9-ball tour, you better have pretty deep pockets,
Yeah.
Whereas if you're playing Euro Tour and you're going to let the government fund you to go to different events, whatever, it might be a cushier move for you to stay where you're at.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on,
So
where you stand then, Mike, in the in the pecking order,
In the
right?
hierarchy, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
so I think it's important to note that I think, Melina, you're interviewing Emily tomorrow. Is that right? At least
Tomorrow,
until she
tomorrow
sees
morning.
this. Maybe that changes. But
At
the
7 o'clock in the morning, I'm gonna get a message saying that
Well,
she's out. But
luckily it's past midnight in the UK, so she's probably fast
they'll
asleep.
they'll watch it in the morning. I
she's
can
got
guarantee that.
notifications turned on for this
I
show,
can
Penoso.
guarantee you. Yeah.
But so I think it's important. We got a lot of great comments in here and people expressing opinions. If you guys have any questions that you'd like to see Melina ask Emily, I'm not going to be able to make that interview. Another interview that Melina scheduled when I'm not available. Thanks, Melina. Appreciate you. But shoot them in the comments
I'm
here.
sorry, Emily. Can you come on tomorrow at 2:00 in the morning your time, because Joey will then be available.
Bingo, bingo, bingo. My man Mike coming with the haymakers again.
Yeah. But Penoso, you punted on this one last time, but I'm going to ask you to take us through. You titled this "Taking the Bull by the Horns," and it was Matchroom's announcement where you, quote unquote, you say they're effectively distancing themselves, or after WPA distanced themselves from Matchroom, the British promoter today announced a formal worldwide 9-ball tour boasting $3 million in total prize fund and 40 ranking events. Tell us about it.
That's some smooth writing right there, let me tell you. Well, everybody saw the
Pat yourself on
announcement
the
today,
back,
and it's really not really nothing shocking in that to me. It's just a formal, release of this. If you've talked to Barry Hearn, Emily, you've listened to them over the last 6-8 months. They've talked about their frustration with the WPA. They're wanting to get their rankings established as the worldwide, standard for 9-ball. They've talked about, listen, if WPA is not going to do this, we're going to do it by ourselves. We've been, underwriting the growth of this sport for X number of years, and we want ownership. And so all this stuff has been coming, and we've heard Emily talk in the past about, having to start to build this network of events and of promoters to tie in with them and to help build what would end up being this worldwide tour, right? And so now they just think they saw the opportunity to say, okay, we're just going to go ahead and throw it right out there on the table and say, here's a name for it. Here's what we're doing. And, anybody who wants to climb on the wagon, climb on the wagon. So from that standpoint, it wasn't anything, that really shocked anybody, I don't think. But it was very interesting to see it because now they've really stuck their chin out there and they've got to follow through on this in a more measured way over the next year or so, right? There's a lot of big statements in that press release that came out today, and Matchroom has always shown they were able to back it up. So I don't see this, all of a sudden getting scuttled, but it's a big bite to, a big piece to bite off.
Melina?
I'd have faith in her to be able to chew it and spit it back out. I would, from what they've been able to do and everything that they've said they were going to do over the last few months and over the last few years, rather. I think they've put their money where their mouth is. No pun intended. And I also feel like they're saying that we can handle this and we can make something out of this. And I feel like everywhere you look, the popularity of and the way that they produce it and display for people is just gaining momentum. I feel like, and they're making stars out of all these players at the same time. Now it's all relative, right? Because they're still pool players and they're still on the in the money wise still vastly growing, but it's a start. And listen, to be able to get so many promoters to buy into what you're selling is massive, massive. I feel like, and it's going to give people an opportunity to compete all over the world. Um, and I was thinking about tennis, and I always refer to pool back to tennis, but watching over the last weekend and following sports the way I do, I started realizing there was like 3 or 4 tennis events that included, decent players in every single one of them. So there's a possibility for everyone to kind of have their own pie and figure out what to make of it from there and just see who comes out winner at the end.
Well, here's a thought that I had with if you look at Matchroom's schedule and you look at the events coming up, it's now turned global, right? There's
Right.
Asia, there's Spain, there's obviously Europe, the United States, but is the sport ready for global? Meaning for the average player, average professional player, 760, 770, Fargo, obviously they can play in these events, but I just bought 2 plane tickets to Spain that were $1,500 round trip each.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's expensive to get around the globe to play. Mike, you're messing up the screen, Mike. We're not talking about Super Billiards Expo yet. That's coming. But it's expensive to get across the globe right now to play in these events. And so at some point, do you see it, and maybe this is a good question for Emily tomorrow, is it going to be a scenario where maybe you get a handful of the very best players that will travel the globe because they have the funds and the backing to do so? And so when they go to Asia, it's those 15 or 20 people who can afford it, and then local regional, pros from that area. And then same thing when they go to Spain, they get that handful of players from Europe, and then they get a whole bunch of like good Spanish players, but maybe not top tier players. And if that's the case, if it plays out that way, is that good for the sport?
I think it's always going to be good for the sport if you have global participation and global events and get news out there and visibility all over the world. I mentioned in the article today that it really does, it's different than their darts and different than their snooker because they're all basically played in the UK and continental Europe. Pretty much it, right? So the players don't have to go all over the world. Now you're talking about a world.
Not just that, but the prize funds are better.
This guy, yeah, right, and now you've got a moderately priced, moderate prize money events played all over the world. You expect these players to go to. And I asked her, Emily, is that can you do that? And she said, listen, you have to give some patience with the calendar and the juggling of events, and she's going to have to start working with promoters. I think that the end game is to try to do what you're talking about, which is if you're going to have a major Matchroom promoted event in the U.S., like the U.S. Open, that there will
Have
be
everything
tour
around it.
events around that, right?
It has to be.
And
That's
it has
like
to be.
golf
And then the
is.
same in Europe, and then the same in Asia. And so you have these, and I asked her, is there, are you looking at some kind of seasonality for the tour?
Yes.
Is it going to be a 12-month year? So that's why I said it was a big step for them to come out and go ahead and stick their chin out there and say, we're doing this, because these are all questions they're going to have to answer in relatively short order, because it's not going to take long for guys like a Shane Wolford to run out of money trying to chase 9-ball ranking events
Wow,
in Asia
dagger,
and Europe.
dagger for
I'm
poor
just
Shane
looking.
Wolford.
Well, I'm looking at you're talking about those, high 700, mid 700
Yeah,
guys that are aspiring to be pros, and I wish him all the luck in the world. And he's a great
yeah.
young player, but he's going to find out a lot in a hurry about how expensive this is going to be to try to do that.
It's
Yeah.
going to have a trickle down effect within the industry, because it's going to put these players more on notice to their sponsors to get more support, and who they choose to have as sponsors, and also force them to get more creative when it comes to how they market themselves and leverage themselves to companies in order to get more assistance, and it's the pool players have been in the stone ages when it comes to a lot of these things. Only now, with the pushing of Emily, have more players taken to social media and made themselves more available than ever before. Because I can think, even in the last 5 years, I just hear people just digging their heels in the mud on the idea of posting with any kind of regularity, right? And some of these quote unquote sponsor players are going to have a real come to Jesus moment with themselves, with the people in their camp, with the people who are sponsoring them, and see if whether or not it actually makes sense on both ends. That's part of the reality as well. So
Yeah, I like the idea of going to something like a seasonality approach. Golf does that. We all know that. In the cold months, they're in Hawaii, and then they move to California, and then they go to the warmer places. And so there's this regional thing where the players can travel with the tour and save money along the way. It's not like they're constantly flying from continent to continent or coast to coast, which really, if you wanted to play in all these events, you would be flying from continent to continent, and sometimes right on the heels of each other, which is a huge lift and a huge ask. So I think they're going to have to figure that out. That's something that if they did have a way to do that, right? If they had
you've already
their
seen that
North
with players, though.
American, if they had their North American, 3 months where culminated with the U.S. Open, but prior to that, there's 3 or 4 events in the United States or North America, let's say, that players could kind of attend before they go to that event, and then they had their European season, and then they had their Asian season. I could see that working, but it's going to be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. That's for sure. I mean, there's
I
a
think
lot that goes into it.
there's been plenty of time for people to get their shit together, to create, regional tours, an American Pool Association or whatever, you know what I mean? To kind of
No.
take the bull by the horns. And now Matchroom saying, listen, we're going to be the ones to figure all this out. They're getting their hands dirty with it. And having 40 events, listen, it's going to be rough to travel, but players are going to have options. And I feel like that's a good thing in the grand scheme of things,
Well, there's no doubt that with 40 events, they're not. You can't turn that into a season. You can't turn it in. So it's kind of a starting point for what will probably eventually become a qualification system, right? Where then you take the top 14 events or 15 events that are going to make your season, and you're only going to be in that
majors, Mike
thing. 15 is too many majors, but they'd be good. They'd be really good events. They would fall into really good category. And so, you've got to earn your way into those events, and you do that through the other 30, 25, 30 events around the world in the meantime. Right. That's, I think, eventually what they would love to see happen in a perfect world. But you have to start establishing these events and making connections with these promoters and getting them to start to pick up the pace on funding of the events and staging of the events, so that you've got a good representation. And then you can start saying, okay, here's going to be the new tiers. I mean, who knows? I mean, this is going to be completely the last thing in the world she's thinking about, but it kind of makes sense to me if you measure it against other sport tours. individual sports like tennis or
So,
golf.
so if I'm a professional dart player or a snooker player and I don't live in England, would I have moved to England to be
Yeah,
close to all that action?
sure. A lot
Well,
of
I mean,
Chinese
is that
players, the Chinese players have.
so? Why hasn't that been done in pool? Why haven't they said, you know what, we're basing
Well, it has happened in pool with all the Europeans living in the U.S. when the game was a U.S. game.
no, but I'm saying
So,
like if Matchroom's based in the UK and obviously it's going to save them money to have events in the UK, how come they just didn't start having more events in the UK and then have US players move over to the UK to compete like I would have done if I were a
Oh, I'm
professional
sure
dart?
American fans
well,
would love
because
that.
for one,
We'd
you
hate
can't.
it, but I'm just saying like if you think about how do you grow something globally, I don't really think that the easiest way is to start having events globally. It's to start having events in one area, get a huge following. People are going to follow it around, be stuck to these events, and then all of a sudden start growing out from there. It's kind of like
Yeah, but
going
like
the opposite
no
way.
matter what, you're going to be a bad guy to one group of players. If you base it, if you have X amount of events just solely here in the U.S., all the Europeans and Asian players are going to complain. Dennis Gray may be at the top of that list, and then if you have, if you have if you have all the events based out of Europe, then American fans are going to go nuts. So
Yeah, I mean
and the
the
players for
game's
that
too
matter.
global. The game's too global to do that. Snooker and darts are not, so they can get away with that there. So I think that the way they're doing it, and you want to have big events if you're trying to grow the sport globally and get broadcast partners and all that stuff and draw crowds, paid audiences, that type of thing. You've got to take pool to the people. So you got to take it to the U.S. You have to take it to the continent in Europe. You've got to take it to the Philippines. You've got to take it to Taipei. That type of thing. So and then
Agreed.
the players can chase each other around a little bit. You just have to organize it in such a way that you don't burn the players out and drive them broke in the meantime.
It's going to be survival of the fittest.
Well, it's
In
supposed to
a
be in
lot
any
a lot
sport,
of people,
really.
yeah, but it's different though, Mike, because you can survive being mediocre in tennis or golf as long as you're on the tour. You can do okay for yourself, and
How many
it's
players out there are fighting for the number 64 spot on the PGA?
yeah,
There's a lot of great golfers in this world who are killing themselves on a weekly basis to get to that 64 spot where you can make a good living as a mediocre player. So
right,
I just think that it's all relative to
of course.
the amount of money that's in a sport. So the more money that's in pool, the tougher it's going to be to crack that top 64. The more money there is in snooker, the tougher it is to crack that type of thing. It's kind of a natural progression, I think. Follow the money.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting time for the sport. When we started doing this a few years ago, Mike, we didn't have anything like this to talk about, really. Some of these things were just kind of concepts at that point. Predator and CSI were just getting together and starting their pro billiard series, and Matchroom was starting to add events, starting to heat up. But now we're in a position that's completely different, right? There's tons of events. There's literally with, what is it, 40 events Matchroom's going to have? There's no way to not have those over top of the U.S. Pro Billiard Series events. Is there?
No,
Say
there's
that
no
again,
way
Joe.
now. They do 10 events now. There's no way to avoid
Yeah,
it.
I don't
So,
think there's a way to avoid it.
yeah.
So you're going to have players, and at some point, I mean, I would think that Predator sponsor players would be strongly encouraged to attend the Predator U.S. Pro Billiard Series event.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. That's an interesting thing you bring up there. What I was the way I was looking. Well, what I was looking at from the 10 ball standpoint is that um, they may end up with a good European following in Predator 10 ball events if the EPBF ends up putting some pressure on players from national federations to play in more of the Euro Tour events, hence, in more of the 10 ball events to get the funding and things like that. And they look over and they see that the Matchroom events, they're going to have to kill themselves to finish 32nd. Maybe I just play the 10 ball events. I played a Euro Tour. I played so you could have enough players for both tours. There are enough of them out there. So, maybe that's part of an answer. we'll see over time how that works out.
We know why Predator and CSI are having the races to 4. We know that they're trying to get viewership. They're trying to get people who don't watch pool interested in pool. But I'm going to pose an interesting hypothetical for you. If the Predator US Pro Billiard Series CSI events were straight races to 9-10 ball, okay, true double elimination, straight races to 9-10 ball, and players had a choice between maybe not the top US Open World 9 ball, but let's say maybe another one of those Matchroom events, and going to one of those, 25,000 added Predator events that's now a straight race to 9-10 ball. That would be a lot tougher decision, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if it was 25 or 50,000 added and you were playing that in the middle of Ohio, and American players had the choice of either going there or flying to, Austria for the, German Open or European Open. Yeah, big, easy decision for a lot of players. And to me, that doesn't mean that either field won't sell out. It kind of maybe waters a little bit down on the strength of both fields, but hell, it's a good payday for both. Good payday for. Well, it depends. It depends on how many.
Because I've already feel like you've seen players show where their initial alliance is going to go. That's what I.
Give me an example.
And look at the press release today. Look at everybody's social. Look at everyone's personal Facebook and Instagram today.
Point.
Well, you're talking. Okay, so who's put their eggs in the Predator 10 ball basket?
I mean, I feel like it's
because you can't just say the ones that made the Matchroom posts today about 9 ball. I want to know who's put their eggs in the Predator 10 ball basket.
I'm just saying, like, as far as a priority, right? Players are going to play Predator events as long as that availability is there. But that priority will go to the Matchroom event first, I feel like. Whether it's the format or whatever,
Yeah.
So, no matter the reason. Look, Federer's won 2 Pro Billiard Series events. Now he's all over the Matchroom, Facebook, social media.
He's playing the Predator event. And
that's what I'm saying. But as long as there's availability, a lot of these players are still going to play both events. But I'm just saying, if you ever get to a point where there's a choice to be made, then I feel like you'll see a lot more of that alliance shift, even more so. Because I feel like it's already there, to be honest. I do.
I think we're going to see a lot more of that, where players are going to have to decide and choose allegiances, which is, to me, is not a good thing.
Your point as far as Q sponsorship is a really interesting one, Joey, in terms of at what point do the screws start getting put to some of these players to show up? Because, at this point, Predator and Matchroom are, not on the friendliest of terms. And so I don't see Predator all of a sudden becoming a sponsor of a bunch of Matchroom events. So how are they going to get their name out there? By the same token, listen, even if it's not a Predator event, their player goes and wins the World 9-ball championship. They get some good exposure for this.
True, but we see it in other sports too. In golf tournaments, if the golf tournament is sponsored by, a certain company, and one of the players is also sponsored by that company, they expect them to show up and play in the event. We saw Tiger Woods. I mean, he was very selective for years about the events that he played in, but there were certain events every year that he played in because of sponsorships. Mm-hmm. And so I can see that being a scenario in the future where, hey, look, are they going to sell out these events? They're probably going to sell out the events. They're having a good track record. Predator, I'm talking about their 10-ball events. They have a good track record so far of selling out these events. And there's enough people who play low 700s, maybe up to 750s, that are like, hey, I got a shot to play a pro, to maybe go deep. It's only, best out of 3 races to 4. Maybe I could do a little something here. So I think they're going to continue selling out events, but at some point it means more to have a super strong field, I think. Yeah, it does. And maybe a Predator player winning that event over another Predator player, or over, Fedor, or, you know what I mean? And being able to kind of hang that hat on it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Dom just brought it up, and I was just about to say, there's a line there where it's not where you can't put the screws to somebody. If your top 2 or 3 guys that you're actually paying decent money to, them you might be able to put the screws to. But if I'm, a Predator Pro because they give me 4 Qs a year, that's not gonna, you're not holding a gun to my head.
Yeah.
To play an event. So there's a different level of, and
that's an interesting point.
That's what I meant as far as players having a come to Jesus moment with those sponsors, though, the ones who are getting behind
that's
them.
A great point. Maybe they do want a little more say in the events that their players choose, and maybe now they have to up their game and add a little bit more to the pot, that they would have some more control over what the players do. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of trickle down. That's why, it's kind of interesting to me that these last couple of announcements by the WPA and by Matchroom didn't elicit more social media buzz, and I think that a lot of people just weren't 100% sure what to make of them. But there's a lot of trickle down from both of these announcements and what they mean going forward. It's going to be really interesting to see how things play out.
I think it's the tip of the iceberg, because I feel like as it continues to evolve and more and all these things start to play out, you're going to start seeing effects down the road with different areas of the industry regarding these decisions made over the last few months.
I don't know that the casual fan really understands the politics that are going on behind the scenes. They tune in one weekend and it's like, oh, great, a Predator CSI event. I'll watch some 10 ball. They tune in the next weekend. They're watching a Matchroom event. I don't think they really think about it the way we do, where we're trying to see the punches and the counter punches and what's going to happen and figure out like where this is going to be in 6 months or a year. So I'm not sure, but one thing I do know is that Dominic Dunn's got a lot to say on this. We should have invited him, man. He's typing paragraphs in here.
Paragraphs. He's a prolific writer today. In fact, earlier on, he mentioned that it was a bad example using Shane Wolford as my example, because Shane Wolford is not going to run out of money, which I think is his code way of saying that Dom has spent too much time betting against Shane Wolford.
Could be. Well, hey, look, what else we got going on in the pool world, guys? There's a little bit.
Don't jump off this.
We got one more thing. Okay.
Don't jump off this just yet.
I got to go in 8 minutes, so I got a hard stop today.
8 minutes? Oh shit. What do you guys make of $3 million in 40 events?
What does that come out to?
Let's do a little math.
Yeah, I was doing some math, as luck would have it. All right.
Okay, Mike.
So if you take, I'm assuming, now when I talked to Emily, she said that when she talks about, in their press release, they talked about 10 major events. And she's not actually talking about major, she's talking about Matchroom events. So that would include World Pool Masters, World Cup of Pool, things like that. So
if you're including the Mosconi Cup, that's $375,000 by itself.
Yeah, right. No, if you're including World Pool Masters, Mosconi Cup, World Cup of Pool, and PLP, that's $840,000 itself. So that really can't be part of the $3 million she's talking about.
Right.
Now, if you talk about the other events that are Matchroom events, U.S. Open, World Pool Championship, UK Open, European Open, Spanish Open, Asian, right? You're looking at about 1.4 million. Okay, which leaves 1.575 for the other 30 events, comes out to about 52,000 an event. That's that's
not a lot.
It doesn't seem, and you've got some events like the International, which is over 100,000. So again, and it's not a criticism.
Is that money that just Matchroom is investing, or is that the other sponsors?
Matchroom's not investing a dime in the International, not investing in some of these other tournaments that are going to be added to the schedule. But, and like I said, it's not a criticism. It's just, I like looking at numbers when they start throwing numbers out and you think it's real, dazzling and whatever. But I think what the point to them is that, some of these tournaments aren't going to be really big, but they're going to be part of the process. And we need to start there to build to a certain level, right? And to be
Yeah.
able to parcel things off so that this is considered part of the tour and this is considered part of the rabbit tour or whatever you want to call it. One of the things she said today that I wrote about was, she said, it's going to force some of these promoters to up the ante on their events. Otherwise, in the next year, they're going to get dropped off because we've got too many events that fit the criteria, right?
Of course.
So it's
of
again,
course that's
it's
going to
this,
happen, Mike.
it's
Absolutely.
this part of the process of building stuff up.
Yeah.
All right, Mike.
Yeah, what happened, Mike?
What?
What was that?
Sorry.
You just stopped so abruptly. It looked like you looked out your window. I'm thinking, is he taking fire?
No, it was
just kicked in
a
Mike's door
message
over
that
there.
popped up on my screen with another big announcement. So,
Well, what is it, Mike? Is it something breaking? We could break it on the show.
no.
Oh, okay. Big announcement. You got to get your hair cut tomorrow. Got it.
100%. But yeah, so I mean,
Well, why don't we task Melina Mike with that tomorrow, talking to Emily about the numbers a little more and trying to understand that.
Oh yeah, you do that, Mike.
Because this Mike's going to be on the show with me tomorrow morning. So
I did notice earlier in the show when you were talking about everything, Mike, I wanted to say to Joey, does this sound like a real "I'm protecting my tomorrow" interview type of response from Mike?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think, listen, we can have fun about it and have an opinion about it. I feel like that's part of why, we are where we are, and part of like what Joey was saying before, as far as like glorifying some of these aspects of the game, like that's part of our responsibility. I was watching the NBA, what was it? The playing game last night, right? Minnesota and the Lakers, right? And Lakers are getting blown out by half, and all they're still talking about at halftime is the Rudy Gobert situation. And if you know about that, it was all over social media about the punch between teammates, and that aspect of it, for better or worse, is part of what we're here to go and chop up and discuss and get people excited about, and that's I feel like is on our shoulders. But at the same time, like it's in an important part of the conversation, holding some of these people, I don't know if accountable is the right word, but just like, but just like, listen, this is what's out there. So if we have an opinion about it, that's up to us, and then how they choose to react or don't react is up to them. I'm still
look, there's times where there's times where there's problems, and there's times where they're happy problems. Having a lot of pool tournaments and trying to figure out which ones to go to, that's a happy problem that we didn't have years ago. So, I think from that aspect, we have to make sure we don't lose sight of that, right? That there's big players in this game that might not be getting along great right now, but they're doing good things for the sport. And so at the end of the day,
Mr. Positivity.
I think we're all grateful for where we are now compared to where we were, 5-6 years ago. But at the same time, it's creating some friction. It's creating some.
What you don't want is for that friction to result in one wins, one loses, and one goes away, and the other has everything. Has a monopoly. Okay, that's usually not the best thing in the world either, right? So,
but they're also forcing each other to kind of up their game at the same time, which I feel like is a great thing.
Yeah, but if you look at sports, I mean, it's monopolies aplenty. You have the NBA. You don't have anything that competes with the NBA. You don't have anything that really, until this year, you didn't have anything that competed with the PGA, right? And then LIV. And so, I don't know, maybe sports are meant to be more monopolies.
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask,
Yeah.
I mean, because like the USFL doesn't, or the XFL, or all these other leagues that have popped up over the years really can compete with the NFL.
The what?
The lingerie league.
What was that?
What are you watching, Mike?
You've never seen lingerie football?
No.
Oh my God, you guys, seriously.
Mike's a season ticket holder.
Well, hey guys, I got to get out of here, but why don't I just drop off? You guys keep talking, because we're going to talk. I think you guys are going to talk about, just give a little preview about the Super Billiards Expo. And if I stay, I'll end up telling that story about the great run that I had in the 2009 Super Bowl or whatever it was, and Molino put the ticker up. Yeah, here we go. Did I mention I beat Jason Klatt in that tournament?
Yeah.
I don't know if it. Yeah. Anyway, see you guys. Have fun talking about the rest of it. I'll catch up with you later.
Joey.
Later, Joey. Mike, you talked about that the end game and not wanting one of them to go away. I mean, like, you've been around this industry long enough to know. Is that where you think it'll eventually head to? If you were going to wager any money on it, or give what you think would happen.
I don't think that one will go away. I think that there might be like a restructuring of how, Predator is always going to want to promote the sport to help promote its brand and its products, right? So they're going to be involved in the pro game at some level, no matter what. So,
and to some extent, they're not just solely tying their brand to 10 ball, because they've had a junior 9 ball, they've had a women's world 9 ball.
Yeah,
so
right.
They're not, and the world, even though the world teams was a 10 ball event,
right.
But they've done.
But that's where the window is for them to go in unobstructed, right? They don't have to deal with anybody else if they go to 10 ball route.
What do you mean? I mean,
they don't have to deal with Matchroom and their rules and their tournaments. They can, they were doing 10 ball, and you guys do whatever you want with your 9 ball rankings, because we wouldn't be part of.
Yeah, but is that a good thing though, Mike? Because you've already seen players push back when it comes to this format, and like we all talked about early on, like if players had a choice, they would play 10 ball fundamentally before any other game. Right.
Yeah. That comes down to
Shane was the first one to say, I only like 10 ball. 10 ball is the game. That's the only game I love playing, until all this shit started happening the last few years, and he's part of that format.
Yeah. Well, like I said, this becomes a business decision. That was a marketing and business decision on Predator's part to try to build new viewership and bring new,
which I think was great,
by making it more exciting, whatever. So whether they dig their heels in and never give up on that approach, or whether they concede a certain amount and make things a little more palatable to the top pros to be involved, that's a decision they're going to have to make. That'll be a business decision.
I mean, I'm curious to see where it ends up, because, I saw a Predator post maybe this last week saying there was given some hint as to some of the players who are going to be out in Wisconsin or Ohio, whatever the next event is. And part of that was filler, which I was real surprised to see, because Josh has been adamant. He is not going and playing Race the 4. He's not traveling anywhere playing Race the 4. He may not have said it publicly, but definitely has been his stance as far as where his attendance is at over the last few years. And to see his picture on there really surprised me. So maybe they are being more open-minded, or maybe they're getting, some nudging to go and attend.
Yeah, well, it's probably one or the other, Mike. Is if I can channel my Joey Ryan.
play the middle, Mike. Yeah, it's a good look.
My bet would be it's one or the other.
One of them's gonna win. Now, I think at the end of the day, it's a good problem to have to an extent. I feel like it's tough for some of these players, especially for those trying to, cut their teeth and get into the Mosconi Cup, because I feel like that's everyone's dream. I'm curious, because I feel like the next step is going to be, how are we going to keep these Asian players incentivized to follow along all these events, right? Like the Europeans,
I think
the Americans, all have
part of the way you do that is you start building events in Asia. So
yeah, but like
everyone's
working towards
some of these events at home.
Mosconi Cup, Mike. So how does that doesn't include Asian players?
No, I don't think the Asian players care that that they're not building.
You don't think they want to be showcased like that?
Of course they would want to, but I don't think it's holding them back from being involved in pro 9 ball events. This is what they do. They play pool.
Yeah.
So and it gets them, they play pool and they play in the Matchroom events, and that gets them into every Matchroom event other than the Mosconi Cup. So I don't think any of them are losing sleep over not having a Mosconi Cup payday. Would they like it? Sure, who wouldn't? But I don't think anybody's,
But you don't think getting into that market would be real juicy for some of these players? I mean, we just talked about a $750,000 first prize for a Chinese 8 ball. You don't think if we got some of that money coming into 9 ball that it could really make things even better for players?
Yeah, of course. But where do you think that money's going to come from into 9 ball?
I don't know, but I'm somewhere out there. We got to get those people, get them excited, And
I mean,
like
Joy has all their money in the hay ball, corner. So, and they seem to have a lot of money. So unless you find someone like that in Asia who's willing to underwrite nine ball, I think it's, uh,
Well,
and
but it could be. I feel like, yeah, it can be mutually exclusive. I think Chinese eight ball is always going to have its hand on the throat of that market, right? But there's a way to get a slice of that pie going towards nine ball players if they were to have it be more inclusive. And that Asian tour is, I feel like, a first step towards that.
yeah, and I'm glad they're doing an Asian tour. I'm glad that they've got some promoters there who are willing to put some money into it, and Matchroom's promoting one of their own events there. So that was the next place that they needed to go. It took a couple of years between COVID and getting the rest of the world kind of getting Europe and the U.S. situated before they bit off even more. So now it's a good time to jump into Asia and see what we can develop there. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I feel like we're in a good spot, and I'm optimistic, but there's also a lot to continue to discuss and talk about, and bring on more people with that. So starting tomorrow,
Yeah.
we'll have Emily on. I'm sure we'll reach out to a few others. We got. I think I'm gonna be pretty busy this week, and we'll have a chance to talk about the Super Billiards Expo in the next few days. I know they got all the vendors out there. It's a weird format this year, on the pro side, and of course they got the amateur thing going on out there as well. We'll jump into it and we'll have a good time with it. But in the meantime, Mike, I think we're done for the night, or at least I
Yep.
am.
I'm cooked.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to tomorrow, man. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Thanks a lot for sticking with us, and we'll be back later. See you guys.
Later.